Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about how functional diagnostic nutrition plays into biohacking. And our guest today is Reed Davis, who is a board-certified holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist. He is an expert in functional lab testing, and we'll get into what that is, and holistic lifestyle medicine. He is the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, FDN, and the FDN certification course with over 3,000 graduates in 50 countries. Reed served as the health director at a wellness center in Southern California for over 10 years, and with over 10,000 clients, is known as one of the most experienced clinicians in the world. He also serves on the advisory board of the American Natural Wellness Coaches Board and American Association of Natural Wellness Coaches. He lives in the US, and when not teaching the FDN certification course, or helping his graduates build their private practices, he is usually found gardening and riding motorcycles. Reed, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wade, thank you so much. Good to be here with you, sir.
Well, you know, we met last year at, I believe it was Paul Chek's 60th birthday. And number one, Paul always surrounds himself with the people that are integrated into his life. And we struck up a conversation, and it was clear to me that you had a deep understanding of the human condition, and particularly some of the elements that influence people being capable of achieving the goals, whether that's fitness or health goals. And you talked to me about how you were running all these labs. So, and then what this was revealing, and why oftentimes traditional medical doctors and institutions were limited in their capability of understanding the big picture. And you know, as a former personal trainer, and I know you were as well, you would get these people will come into the gym, they come into the thing, they've quote unquote tried everything, they've been to a plethora of experts, and they can't they're working hard, they're trying to eat their food, they can't figure out what's going on, or something's really badly going wrong, and they don't know where to go. And that's kind of where functional medicine comes in, is kind of like bridging that gap. Would you say, can you tell us how maybe you got into this field, what started it, and how did you end up with over 10,000 clients and doing these analyses, which are not easy by any stretch of the imagination?
I'll answer the last part first. Early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and advertise. My dad taught me that. That's how I do business. I get up early every single day and work my butt off. So the good news is, if you start at 4, you can put in an 8-hour day and be done at noon. So you got the rest of the day to play or do more work, go outside, work out, do all the things you really love to do. Like you mentioned, gardening and motorcycle riding. That's it. That, and I have a young wife, and we like to travel and do things. So I just work hard. But I started off, by the way, I remember Paul's 50th birthday party, and that was I think the one you and I met at was even more fun. So back in the 90s, I was doing environmental law. I was saving the planet, conservation, air, birds, water, trees, bees. I noticed how badly these things were being battered, and I started worrying about people, thinking about people. Like, I was healthy, I didn't have any real problems, a few owies, bumps and bruises and some dental work, but I didn't know how bad this medical system was. So I went to work in this clinic in Poway. It's near San Diego, California. Amazing place, good doctors. Everyone coming in there had a chronic degenerative thing going on. They weren't gunshot wounds and Ebola virus. It was long-term chronic things that had been bothering them for years, and they just weren't able to get over the hump. And most of them had been to 6 or 8 or 10 different practitioners. And I just thought to myself, I think I was out riding my motorcycle one day, and I'm driving along and feeling all free and happy and healthy and stuff, thinking, these poor people, they're they're taking it up the butt. They're giving control of their health to someone else when they need to be taking responsibility for it. And I just flat out figured they were getting ripped off. And back in the office, me being just the guy I am, I determined way back then, I'm going to be the last person you need to see. And I had no idea how, but I've never let that stop me before. And I went to work I became a personal trainer, I became a nutritionist, I became a metabolic typing advisor. I got, just like most of the listeners, I had a bunch of certificates on the wall and a lot of good experience. But the most important thing was probably running labs. I learned how to run labs under the doctors that were there, and I could pretty much run anything I wanted. Now, the difference, although I could run these labs and look for underlying causes and conditions, is I couldn't diagnose anything. I couldn't treat anything specifically because I wasn't licensed to do so. And your listeners probably would appreciate that. It's good they're licensed. Practicing medicine is dangerous. Drugs and surgery are dangerous. You need to have a license to do that stuff.
Like you should have a license for a firearm, and more people die from medical challenges or misdiagnosis or contraindications. I think it's the third leading cause of death. Some people say
I'll tell you what, the third, it's still cardiovascular disease and cancer, but the third leading cause of death is medical mistakes. And it's up to 250,000 people per year. Some estimates around 400,000 people per year. Now, if one nutritionist killed one person, they'd outlaw nutrition. Like there's no more of that stuff. But they get to operate in a different world, and we don't want to put that down because they serve their purpose, obviously.
Correct.
But the truth is, the system wasn't working for the people coming in our office, and I was determined to find a way to get to the underlying causes and conditions. And along that way, I made a lot of discoveries. I ran over 10,000 labs and interpreted them without giving a medical diagnosis, just a data analysis, a non-medical opinion, if you will, on what they can do.
Can you tell us what
to improve their health?
Can you tell me that maybe the difference between what a data analysis might say versus a diagnosis?
Oh, sure.
Because I think because this is a sketchy area that I think a lot of people who listen to nutritionists, they might be able to see something from the data, but making a diagnosis is a whole other ballgame.
Well, there's two ball games. So you just start there, that there's two different worlds, there's two different sandboxes. And we don't play in the other guy's sandbox. We're not there to diagnose and treat disease. People have had that done already. A lot of the people who came in our office who've been to 6 or 8 practitioners had at least 4 or 5 different diagnoses for what was wrong with them. None of them were on target, or they wouldn't be coming to see us. They were all just kind of, the way I look at it is a lot of the labs that physicians run either don't tell you anything. I mean, have you ever had a person say, I went to my doctor and they said, nothing's wrong with me?
Yeah, you're within normal parameters, and yet normal parameters means that you've got the disability adjusted life expectancy in this country is 60 years old. Longevity is on the decline, not the increase. Obesity is spiraling at a rate, and cardiovascular and cancer is proliferating the population and so I don't want anything to be within a normal range.
Well, the range is just too wide, and to fall outside of it is the only time you get a diagnosis. So that is one of the major differences. Is diagnosis is a label for some either reliable set of symptoms or something that shows up in a test result. And by the way, doctors don't get paid without providing a diagnosis, because almost everybody has insurance. To get past the insurance gatekeepers, you have to have a DX code. And then, of course, there's a treatment code for that, and something that they also dictate. And so we're not wearing those kind of handcuffs, and we don't diagnose or treat anything specifically. Again, that requires a license. What we do, here's the word, the functional word is healing opportunities. So we identify healing opportunities, and most of the time aren't even running the standard blood work. People have already had that done and been told nothing's wrong with them, or maybe something is, you got high cholesterol or, blood sugar or something like that. And typically when you have something that's real out of range, then the physician is going to write a prescription for that one sort of dot, that one little marker,
Yes.
and that's it. And the minute you get a diagnosis like that, everything else is off the table. Oh, well, that's what we're going to focus on. That's what your doctor's visits focus on. They pretty much forget about what you went in there for, what your complaints were. It's let's get those numbers in good shape. We'll titrate up and down, eh?
Let's give you a statin. And you know what I mean? And we'll deal with the cholesterol. But geez, we just disrupted your entire healing process.
Yeah, or thyroid. Exactly. So, well, I'll give you an example. So a lady came in the office and she'd been in a few times, and I'm kind of the triage guy. I'm the one doing the nutrition, any personal training. I would just send them home with exercises and things like that. They're coming in to see a chiropractor or an acupuncturist, and we had a DO and a podiatrist and some other people there, but I was pretty much the person who greeted, walked him back. And I was trained in myofascial therapy, just like Paul Chek, he's an HHP, I'm an HHP. And so I would give a little body work, just a few minutes to get them relaxed, put a heat pack, and then the chiropractor after a little while would come in and do the adjusting. And this lady, again, she'd been coming in for a bit. And I said, hey, call her Susan. So what's going on? You look really down today. She says, oh, it's this weight. I can't stand it. I'm 40 pounds overweight and I'm just really frustrated. And I'm like, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? She says, there's nothing I can do about it. I've been on this medication for 2 years for the hives, big blotchy purple marks all over her body. And, it's just, I have to take this medication. And I went in to see my doctor the other day, and I told him I was really frustrated with the weight. She says, he told her, lady, you can be fat or you can have the hives, take your pick. And she said, well, that's really depressing. And he says, well, I can write you a prescription for antidepressants if you like. So what I said next was, well, why didn't you ever try to find out why you get the hives? And her head snapped around so hard, I thought she wouldn't need her adjustment that day. She just was, what do you mean? No one had ever mentioned that maybe there's something causing that. You could be eating something, rub it up next to something, something in your environment, different things like that. So sent her home with a couple of kits. Fast forwarding just a little bit, maybe not even 2 weeks. She's like, Reed, I called my doctor yesterday and I told him I'm off that medication. I don't need it anymore. And within another week, she was doing two things she hadn't done in 2 years, working out to a point of perspiration and taking hot showers. Because even on the meds, she couldn't take hot showers or work out to a sweat.
Wow.
So and then in another week or two, she said, hey, I'm down 13 pounds. Like, so within, it takes a week or so to get the test results, but from there, boom, just clear path forward. You got things that are preventing you. By the way, she was coming in just for her neck pain from being in the gym and doing it wrong. And they always said, go down and see the chiropractor, go see Reed and the chiropractor, they'll fix you up. And boy, did we fix her up, Now that was really early too, man. That wasn't like after 10 years experience or 20 years experience. That was in the beginning when I was just learning to run labs. So I knew I was onto something. And I have case after case after case, just like that. Amazing stories where, what you said was you go to the doctor, you get a diagnosis, you get a treatment, and, take that medication for forever, maybe, or at least in her case was 2 years, till we looked somewhere else, ran different labs.
The New England Journal of Medicine, at the very initial part of that, this actually discouraged me from becoming a medical doctor. I was originally starting to be a medical doctor. That was my pathway in university. I thought, hey, actually I was going to focus on sports nutrition. And I was researching a paper that required to look at the New England Journal of Medicine. This was before the internet and all that. And you had to go into the library and get a thing and get a book.
I remember those days.
I remember flipping open the first of this book. I'm like, wow, this is the New England Journal of Medicine. Wow, this has got to be cool. And I remember opening up the first pages of this prestigious journal. And they had a preamble in it, basically explaining what the New England Journal of Medicine was all about. And I was struck which changed the course of my life. It said, we do not cure disease. We are in the business of treating disease. In other words, we come up with a disease, we label whatever is going on as a set of symptoms, a condition. It has a label, and then research is done and trials are done to alleviate the symptoms of the condition that they labeled. Had the concern about why that happened, how it happened, and how you can change that was not the business of the medical industry. They were treating the symptoms of disease. We're going to treat that. And I remember thinking about this, and I went, wait a minute. When I listen to my family or I listen to my friends, go to the doctor or go to the hospital, the doctor says you got XYZ disease and we're going to give you this treatment. And I thought, well, I watched them give the treatment to my sister when she had cancer. And I remember she died early, went through 4 years, and we were coming back from the hospital every day from her treatment. And she would be vomiting profusely on the 50-mile drive home, 6 times, maybe 5, 6 times. And as a young man, I went, the treatment seems worse than the disease. And then I saw this and I went, you know what? That's not a field that I'm interested in, because it just seems like a bit of a merry-go-round. And not to, and then later on I met a surgeon, and he had told me how surgeons and a lot of medical doctors don't get along, because the surgeons say, wow, we just cut this out and take care of whatever the problem is. And the medical, and so I didn't realize there's subcategories even within the industry. And eventually I started seeing this whole concept of functional medicine, which is what you're talking about at your institution. Functional, can you explain, maybe, because we talked about data analysis or looking at the root things. What does that entail? Like what I'm trying to say is, because we're used to this medical model, we defer authority to that, we get inside that system, and it just seems, like you said, there's insurance companies, there's diagnoses, there's medical treatments, there's double-blind studies, there's research grants, there's institutional things. And if there's any evidence with what's gone on recently in the last couple of years, when the people who created and caused and designed the problem are entrusted with creating and designing the solution, and it doesn't work en masse, we have a credibility issue in our medical institutions.
Man, you said a mouthful. I mean, you said a lot of things there, and I could go in a lot of directions. So I don't know which one you want me to go after. The functional medicine versus regular medicine or standard medicine.
Let's start there, because you have a great story here about you're thinking in a different way than the medical doctor was primarily in this situation. And I think that's one of the things that you do.
Yeah, I'm thinking a different way, and I'm also operating a different way. My business model is different. They're two completely different sandboxes. The issue that I have with functional medicine, although it's on the right track, I don't know what it's going to evolve into, because it uses the exact same medical model pretty much. It's still diagnosis and treatment. And the reason is the physicians practicing it are bound, they're handcuffed by their standard of care. And a lot of people are using insurance still. Some have some cash practices, but most don't, because people show up with their insurance card. And so you're only going to get paid if you give a diagnosis,
right? And
then you can only give a treatment based on the diagnosis. And that's often not even the doctor's choice. It's just whatever their insurance covers. Person writing the check is the one who decides what you get. Just like a mom takes her 14-year-old to the store for a new dress. Guess who the salesperson turns to? Mom, because mom's the one writing the check, and so it's like that. It's really simple. So that's part of my bone to pick with functional medicine the way it is now. I mean, I'm really happy. I've observed what we did was called alternative. Some people thought we were quacks. Then it went into kind of complementary, which
Right.
is because they started seeing the effects and more people started doing it. Then it became integrative where you want both together, but that still means they're separate. Now they go functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, and these other names for it. They're still diagnosing and treating specific things. And every time you do that, you leave all the other stuff the person has to do off the table. You're not even dealing with it. So a truly holistic program would include looking at as many markers as possible. Now I've developed over 20 years a system of what to look for. I have an acronym for it: the hidden stressors and dysfunctions. And then the protocol also isn't just, here's your prescription, take this for 3 months, I'll see you, I hope you're better. We give people things to do based on that investigation of all those healing opportunities. And then we work with them for that 90 days or whatever, or 6 months, whatever it is. So it's not just see in 6 months, take your pills. It's we're going to see you along the way, and we're going to make sure and help you to conform to the lifestyle patterns, the behavior changes, form some new habits and things. Because you lived yourself into the problem, you're going to have to live yourself out of the problem. Most of these are lifestyle-based epigenetic issues. Now, doctors aren't doing that yet. They're learning to hire health coaches. I've had a lot of them hire health coaches and not be happy with them, and then hire some of the people we train, because we're really big on the anatomy, the physiology, the biochemistry, the lab work. What does it mean? What does it tell you about a person? What are the, again, healing opportunities? So I'll just round that off with, doctors might run a lab. They're looking at this point and this point. Oh, there's something I recognize. There's something I can diagnose. We look at a whole constellation within the hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, the autonomic nervous system. So we're not looking at a couple dots. We're connecting all the dots as it relates to one unique individual and giving them a unique program. Now that program is also codified, but that's a major difference, is the amount of data that we collect. As you mentioned, data was what we wanted to talk about. Yeah, we're running 4 or 5 labs on every person, a couple questionnaires, really trying to get into them, get to know them, and resolve a lot of issues all at once for 2 reasons. It outperforms the other system by a mile, and it's legal. It's absolutely 100% not practicing medicine without a license, because we're not treating one thing.
I have friends in both sandboxes, and
I don't know what that is.
sometimes they get along and sometimes they don't get along. But I ask questions within both of them, and we often arrive at the same institutional challenges that we're faced with, and that is, as you said, billing, insurance, board directives and regulations that often pigeonhole. And I was talking with a friend of mine about 6 months ago. He was involved in putting the first stent in the body, Harvard graduate, brilliant guy. And I asked him a question. He says, it's interesting. There was a couple of things. He's always an interesting talk. He's 80 years old. He's been around forever. He says it's truly remarkable the changes and developments that's happened in surgery since the start of his career to the end of his career. It's like one little surgery that the guy's out in the afternoon, we used to have to open him up from one side of the ribs to the other side of the ribs. And, it was a disaster. And he said, but that's the best we had. And we went through this issue. And I asked him, I said, well, what's different today than what was happening then? He says, well, every surgeon is taught as a general surgeon first. And then what happens is you move into a specialty. And I'm going to bring this back to your equation, because I think it's important to understand, because both industries are suffering from a similar problem. He said, he goes, he says, as a practitioner, I wasn't always honored. He was a veteran. He served in the Vietnam War and did surgery over there. And then he came into his practice in Harvard, and just a really impressive person all around. But he said, things changed in the institution in the 80s. I says, what changed? He said, well, you started to specialize because the insurance from malpractice components or issues became extremely exorbitant. And so surgeons then began to specialize in a specific type of surgery. And that's the only surgery. They would carve out their niche, they'd build their insurance program, they would do the same surgery over and over and over again. And it became compartmentalized just so the guy could run a practice and not spend all his money and time in courts and a variety of things or whatever. And he goes, and what happened, that person didn't want to do general surgery anymore. So a guy comes into the hospital with a gunshot wound or a car accident or whatever. He's like, I'm not doing that because I haven't done that surgery in 25 years. He says, where his generation were like, I want to be the guy doing that surgery at 3 o'clock in the morning because I got an opportunity to save this person's life. And he talked about the compartmentalization of the institutional thinking because of all these external forces that got people down into this very, very tiny box that's all that they did. And what I'm seeing happen concordantly is people are zooming so deep into one little niche. It's like you're in the dot matrix picture and all you can see is this one dot. And if you just step back enough, you can see that there's Mickey Mouse here or some other picture going on. Would you say that part of your field is about being able to zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and zoom in? Would that be accurate?
I'm considered the ultimate zoomer outer, whatever you might call it.
I love it.
It's not the 30,000 foot view, it's the 60,000 foot view, because that's what holistic means, is you're taking a look at the whole person. Now, again, there are some legal ramifications. As soon as you start zeroing in, you're treating something, and that's not what we want to do. We found, again, as I was saying, we can outperform that system. And exactly what you said is going on in the surgery world is going on in standard medicine. Mm-hmm. So you might say have some issues with your bowels or guts or something like that. And you go in, oh, you got to go see the gastroenterologist. So you go over there and you start explaining your problems and you start getting diagnosed and treated for something. And then you're sitting back on a follow-up with that doctor, and because it's a doctor, and he's been working on your gut, you share, doc, I got this other thing going. I can't build muscle. I'm tired all the time. My sex drive is gone, things like that. He says, oh, you need to go see the endocrinologist for that. That's right. Not my area of space. And so I don't like referring out like that. For one thing, I feel like I'm shirking some responsibility ahead to that person, but their consciences are completely assuaged by the fact that they specialize now. And that's not, I just did what GI doctors do. You need to go see, the hormone guy or something like that. So that same specialty is just further exemplifying exactly what's wrong with modern medicine. It's called reductionism.
Yes.
My motorcycle quit on me on the way back from Vegas to San Diego one time. And no amount of roadside tinkering could get me started again. I called the tow truck, went to the dealer. The guy came out after a little while and said, sir, we've diagnosed your problem. We have the parts in stock. We'll have it back to you by tomorrow morning. Okay, great. But he said diagnosis, the same thing we use for people. And I love my bike, but I know it's not a person. So why does standard medicine treat us like I treat my motorcycle? It's called reductionism. Mm-hmm. One problem, one part, one fix. And there's a lot of that happening still in functional medicine. It hasn't arrived yet, but it's doing really good. I love my functional medicine practitioner friends. They love me. They love the way of thinking. Back to your 60,000 or 30,000 foot view. That's exactly what it takes to really have a person take responsibility and treat themselves. And I love what you said about cure real quickly. No doctor's ever cured anything. Neither is a nutritionist, by the way. The body heals itself, plain and simple. Even Voltaire, the famous French philosopher from the 17th or 18th century, said the art of medicine is distracting the patient long enough for the body to heal itself. So all these forms of distraction I'm fascinated with the things that you might get asked to do or told to do. Now, I'm not saying for a gunshot wound that you call your nutritionist. If you get off the plane from West Africa and your temperature's 105 and you're bleeding from your eyeballs, don't call your health coach. You know what to do. Snake bites. I got snakes I have acres, and the damn rattlesnakes, man, they're just everywhere. And you don't get to get bit, but if you do, I'm not going to just come to the kitchen and put some wrap around it. I'm gonna go and get some anti-venom real quick from a real doctor.
Mhm.
So this is something where we should be working together, each one knowing their place and part.
That's such a great illustration, and funny you should say about the body healing itself. That was the same with my friend, the medical doctor. He says he was continuously amazed by the fact that as a surgeon he was doing damage to the body in an idea to reduce, but he goes, I would come back and I would witness the body literally heal itself. He says, I'm doing damage. My job is to do systematic damage in a way, in the hopes that we can remove the condition that's causing the problem, or correct the bone, or whatever it happened to be. Yeah. And then you let the body heal itself. And he goes, and I'm continuously amazed. I don't really know how that works. And he had the humility to say that. So it would seem that with functional diagnostic tools, you're running a series of tests, like labs, whatever you want to call it. And from this, you're able to put together some sort of picture. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, we put together a picture. We sort out. The phrase I use, Wade, is metabolic chaos. So there's all these healing opportunities. Metabolic chaos is such an important concept that's the real problem. And I'll tell you why. Because everyone's heard, look for the root cause, look for the root cause. I have dropped that phrase. What we do is we look upstream for these healing opportunities. So you might look at the hormones, the immune system, digestion, and different functions. But any problem you find there is having an effect on the other problem. So they're interacting with each other. So one root cause, you're not going to find it hardly. Again, with that lady with the hives that I told you about, we kind of got lucky with that. But what we had to do is live a whole lifestyle, including getting off certain foods, and it seemed to work real well for her. But if she just stopped there, it wouldn't have continued to work. She'd still have other problems. So we look at the hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, parasites, bacteria, fungus, viruses, food sensitivities, environmental stressors, mental, emotional stressors, spiritual angst from having no purpose in life, and not to mention chemical and biochemical stress. And so I call that metabolic chaos. That's the one concern that I have. I'd call it a diagnosis, but I can't use that term. But we have one. There's metabolic chaos. There's all these factors crashing into each other. And so we want to identify as much as we can where you need to improve. But then the prescription, if you will, the recommendations are a whole holistic lifestyle: diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction in every way it can be identified, and supplementation, of course. So that stands for DRESS, DRESS, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplements. So that 60,000 foot view is look at the hormones and the immune system and digestion and detoxification, a couple other main functional areas. And then you don't fix anything, one thing, you give something to do that treats every cell, every tissue, every organ, every system at once, the entire organism at once. And that's what works better than the other systems.
What are some of the tests that you like to run in particular to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together to kind of get a picture of what might be going on in someone?
This is another sort of beautiful thing, is these are self-test kits that you can take home and do inexpensively, and they don't need to be ordered by a physician. All of our clients can order it themselves. We can expedite that process for them. So the client gets a couple kits in the mail, puts their saliva, their urine, their stool. They may have to go get a blood test, but a lot of times it can be done through finger stick. You can do even the blood tests at home now. I look at things like the cortisol to Dhg ratio. That tells me if they're in a catabolic state, if their body's breaking down. I look at the sex hormones, of course. We look at secretory IgA, which is easy to look at, also in the saliva, believe it or not. And that would tell me that your immune system is under or overactive. And then we can look at indican, which is telling me whether you're breaking down protein or not. So we don't know. So we know that you have a dysbiosis. You don't have enough good bacteria to break down protein. So not only do you have a dysbiosis, you have a protein assimilation problem. And no matter what kind of good, great grass-fed beef steaks you're eating, or protein bars you're eating, it's not getting absorbed. That's so right. That'll really hold you back. You get people in the gym that can't meet their deadlines on whatever they're trying to do, their goals, and they're just not functioning right. There's something blocking the way. There's metabolic chaos. From there, you can go into antigen penetration, liver congestion, skin and kidney problems. From there, you go into weight and fat distribution issues, glucose homeostasis, for God's sakes. There's all of these factors all going on simultaneously. And you'd have to go see 10 practitioners if you went to through the regular system. Each one would put you on a medication for it, or chop parts out. So you get in there. Oxidative stress is huge. The 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine, or 8-OHDG as we call it. But knowing someone's autonomic type, are you sympathetic dominant or parasympathetic dominant? You got to balance those out. Oxidative rate, you're more of a protein type or there are actually people do very well with a higher percentage of carbohydrates, depending on their genetics, where they're from. The paleo diet is great, but which paleo diet?
Right.
If your ancestors are from Borneo, it's not going to be the same paleo diet as someone from the rocks off the coast of Scotland, or something like that.
Correct. And a lot of people, what I call is they try to look at their health or their life through a low resolution lens, and are one cause, one effect, kind of where they're so, like as you said, this is the negative side of reductionists. It's like you talk to people, and this is also one of the issues in marketing, I think, which is influencing people's decision or observational reality or belief systems. And that is, if you just do this one thing, and everything is going to be better. It's kind of like, and they lived happily ever after. It's like it's like you don't really get the whole story. You got one picture of the story, and yes, there's a percentage of people that one thing produced an extraordinary result, and they're on the testimonial page. But the reality is we have a confluence of factors or I guess unmitigated contaminants that are impacting people's health. What are some of the things that you're seeing? Because you touched on something with you started out in environmentalism and you saw the impact of the bees and the trees, and then you got worried about the people. What were some of the things that you saw there that made you start seeing the impact on human population? So can you maybe kind of take that connection?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at Masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at Masszymes.com.
Yes, sure. I mean, again, I was pretty healthy, but I read a book when I was 19 called Healing Ourselves. And even before that, my mom always cooked fresh food. She was a stay-at-home, and both my grandfathers grew their own food. And so we just kind of grew up that way. You took your cod liver oil in the wintertime. They could say what you want about it now, but my mom knew 70, I'm almost 70 years ago that, we lived in Canada. You need your vitamin D, and stuff. So I kind of grew up with some of those clues around me. And even though I was a very bad boy, in a lot of my teenage years and early 20s, I was hip to looking after yourself, not depending on drugs.
I didn't know that you were Canadian. What part of Canada are you from?
I was born in Toronto.
Me too.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
What a small world. High five on that.
Yeah, yay, Canada. The tyranny formerly known as Canada. That's now.
Oh man, we can't go there right now.
No.
But yeah, I'm very disappointed what's going on. But you know what? I have good Canadian friends and cousins and employees. Some of my, we all work virtually, kind of. So
yep.
Anyway, grew up like that. And when I was 19, I moved out at 18. My dad dropped me off on the highway. I told him I wanted to hitchhike to Boston. We were in Cleveland at the time. He goes, when? I said, tomorrow morning. He goes, okay, I'll get you up. He got me up, took me right to the highway and dropped me off. I was free to do anything I wanted when I was a kid. So, but I came back, got myself an apartment and a job, and went to night school. And I had this book on my kitchen counter. What we used to do back then, you remember this, Wade? Remember, this is before pagers, even before fax machines, even all the modern conveniences that came around later. And so we bought our food at a food co-op. There's no health food stores. There's just food co-ops in bulk. You get the scoop and you got your quinoa or whatever it was.
That's right.
And I would buy this protein liquid. It probably was horrible for you, but I love this stuff. And I bought a book called Healing Ourselves by Nobuo Muramoto. And I don't have to look, I got that burned into my memory. It was on my coffee table for like 30 years.
Wow.
So I read that book 40 times, Healing Ourselves. So I just kind of always came up that way, never seeing physicians. And you asked me, what did you see when you started working at the office? Well, I'd already seen birds and bees dying, pools of water being completely polluted and destroyed, and the plastic and all the things. Matter of fact, we made a lot of money in that business, and cleaning things up. And when I started turning my attention to people, it was I thought I could improve people's performance. I actually want to start a corporate wellness program, which back then was just corporations would get a little gym, call it their corporate wellness program. So
I had one broken bike and a yoga mat, and it was the corporate gym. I set up 2.5 pound dumbbells.
So none of that stuff worked. So I went to work in this clinic. I started working in my son's chiro. He was a super stud high school athlete, all world kind of guy. And I would get him regular chiropractic and massage at this wellness center. And I just ended up working there. I want to work for you. I want to help people, things like that. And then I got into the nutrition and I was there 10 years, man. I can't tell you what I didn't see there. I saw everything. But I definitely remember one really, really cool story, because I would lecture there on anything to do with health and got knowledgeable about stuff. But I never will forget a guy named John Lee. Do you remember the book, What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Menopause?
Yes.
So you probably would. All right. So that came out in about 2001, maybe. And I read it and I got a hold of the guy, and we used to have him do some talks to us and out in California. And he's told a story. he says this lady came to him with some, and what's your complaint? She goes, oh, it's just these doctors, these modern doctors, you know, all they do is give you pills and cut parts out. He said, well, tell me more. She says, well, I had this pain down here, and they said it was my ovaries. They gave me ovary pills for a while, and then after the pills stopped working, they just cut my ovaries out. He goes, I'm sorry to hear that. Tell me more. She said, well, then I got this pain up here, you know, and they said it was my gallbladder, and they gave me gallbladder pills for a while. And then eventually they just cut my gallbladder out. And Dr. Lee says that he goes, don't tell those doctors that you get headaches. And so that's like the joke, but it's like true, you know.
It's a tragic comedy that we're.
And so I've always been really, really cautious and trying to do the right thing and really get the data. You know, I'm considered an expert in some laboratory work, most of the alternative stuff, saliva, urine, stool, some of the blood testing. And so we check, again, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, you know, things like mucosal barrier. We're always looking at that, but we never look at it as a single thing. We don't just pick a lab based on your symptoms. That's what's wrong with fractional medicine. Sounds like thyroid, run a thyroid test. Yep, pat self on back, write prescription for thyroid medication. This will take care of you. We'll be watching those numbers, almost forgetting about what the person's complaints were and their quality of life and all their other habits and all these things. We're going to watch those numbers. And so that person goes back and says, well, I feel a little bit better, doc, but I still have, you know, the low libido and can't build up in the gyms. Oh, that sounds like testosterone. So whatever it sounds like, they run one test and treat that one thing. It's back to me.
Oh, geez, we better jack that up. You know.
Yeah, so that's just a different cycle of trial and error. Try the next test and drug, and that's why people in this country, do you know, I don't know the exact number, Wade, but it's probably average 60-year-olds on 5 medications or something like that.
Well, the Professor Oshensky, going back to the New England Journal of Medicine, published some very dramatic studies on longevity. And he predicted, this was during the Bush administration, the last Bush administration. And in that publication, he suggested that the life expectancy for children at that time was, for the first time in American history, going to be less than their parents.
Oh my
God. And it was, and it was redacted by the institutions in the Bush administration. But what he was allowed to say is that the disability adjusted life expectancy was 60 years old with an average life expectancy of about 80. So that meant that 25% of the average American's lifestyle would be spent in a chronic condition, which would be classified as a disability. So when you think about that for a second, you go, wait a minute. Okay, so life expectancy, say from when they initiated pension programs in Canada, for example, was in the late 1960s. And life expectancy, the federal government was around 63 to 65. I think it was 65 for women, 63 for men. Everybody smoked back then, for people forget.
Yeah.
Right? So they built their whole retirement model that, hey, pretty much everybody's going to be dead. Or I guess it was 60, sorry, my apologies. It was 65. Most people are going to be dead by 67. So we can build a financial model where we pay in from the 1960s, and, you know, the baby boomers were just hitting the workforce. We've got 45 years, and we're going to have this build up reserve money, and then we'll dole that out to people as they age. Well, a couple things went wrong with that model. Number one, people started living longer. Number two, they started living compromised lifestyles that were very expensive and needed to be handled by the taxpayers. In the United States, it's handled by the insurance agencies, which you identified earlier.
Yeah.
And so then it ended up into a big Ponzi scheme. And now we're caught in this whole system. And once you're in that system, it's very hard to get out of, because you've been conditioned to go to the next expert and the next expert. And then you get to that person that comes to your office.
Mhm.
Hey, Reed, I've gone through everything. I've been to this specialist and this doctor, and I've been on this pill, and I got this. And you could spend an hour just listening to all the problems they got from all the solutions.
Yeah.
So how does someone, how does someone avoid that, maybe as a preventative way to say, hey, we're talking about downstream, and it's like, how does someone get involved with the kind of diagnostics that you guys are, or analysis that you got, data analysis that you're running? What are the things that they should be looking for in order to preserve and maintain their health? Or if they start to see a little bit of a poor tracking in a direction, what do they need to do, as opposed to maybe getting caught in that system? What would you suggest?
Hey, don't get hit by a bus, for one thing. There's a reason people live longer today, but I believe that it's how long we're supposed to live. So we know that people live longer than they used to 100 years ago, and you might attribute that to modern medicine. But we have, wiped out some certain diseases and things, and there's not as much accidental death, occupational death, and child death has really gone down, and things like that. So we're living to be, what is it, 80, 74 and 78 for women, or whatever it is, 74 for men, 78 for women. And that's how long we're supposed to live. There was always old people. Da Vinci, the great artist, lived to be 96. And, some of these other really famous people from history, Copernicus or whatever, lived to be 90 or 84, whatever. So there's always been people who lived right and lived long. Mm-hmm. And now there's just more of them doing less dangerous stuff and not getting diseases. And kids aren't dying from malnutrition and childhood diseases and things. So I think we're just getting into the point where we're living about as long as we're supposed to, 80, 90. My mom's 91, still doing really well. And that seems normal to me now. And so the things you can do is, again, diet, eat right for your metabolic type, rest, really get good night's sleep, learn to sleep well every night, exercise every single day, maybe a day off, and then reduce stress in all the ways that it can be identified. And that is the hard part, because there's so many hidden stressors, everything from the environment, the electromagnetic frequencies, radiation, and toxicity in 80,000 different forms, and on and on and on. So we're getting broken down, and we can still catch diseases, but this idea of chronic degenerative disease can be avoided, or at least you can extend your life a long, good, healthy time. I think that diet, rest, exercise, reducing stress in all these different ways, everything from existential angst through emotional, through the chemical and biochemical, and the trauma. That's my background is a lot of trauma to my body from sports and motorcycles and things. That's pain. That'll do a job on you. And then, of course, the chemical things that I mentioned. So I said something, the early to bed, early to rise thing. I think that's really important. You could say you are what you eat, but you're really what you break down and absorb. So you got to have really good, again, I mentioned the functions that we look at: hormones, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production. I don't know another way. But I have to tell you this, when I first started studying this over 20 years ago, went to my dad, he was still living. He didn't die till he was 84, which for a guy who smoked and drank like a fish was pretty good, I guess. But I said, Dad, did you know that women live longer than men? And he goes, no, I go, yeah, they live like 4 years longer than men. And the reason is they care more about their bodies, and they take care of their boo-boos more than men do. Men fix their cars, women work on their body. He said, no, son, men die sooner because they want to.
You bring up
I can't help but throw my old corny stuff in there.
I love it. But there's elements of truth to that. because you talk about existential crises, and I think that's pervasive with the rapid expansion of technology, which we don't know all of the, say, consequences of that on emotional, psychological, family. It's quite evident that there is a significant amount of unexpected challenges that these technologies present to the world. And conversely, of course, we just met met up recently at a conference. And one of the things that strikes me in the quote biohacking world, which is an interesting terminology coined by Dave Asprey as to how to leverage technology in a way that could produce different results in the body. And I want to qualify that. I have a concern. I'm setting this up because I want to get your insight on it. One of the things, I believe bodybuilders were some of the original biohackers out there because they're trying to overcome two evolutionary biases. Number one, they want to gain an exorbitant amount of muscle that takes a lot of calories to sustain. And number two, they want to reduce their body fat levels to what would be below survival, reasonable survival levels. And we've evolved to go against those two things. And so bodybuilders would, do training, a certain amount of subject, but then they eventually moved into anabolics, steroids, things like that. And then after about 20 or 30 years, when they kind of hit the zenith of that by, Arnold Schwarzenegger standards, let's say, all of a sudden in the late 80s, early 90s came the freak show when they started using, insulin and growth hormone and anti-catabolics and this vast array of chemicals. And we saw life expectancy just fall off the cliff for these guys. They started dropping like flies and continue to do so. They say, yes, they're carrying tremendous amounts of muscle and things like that. So that's where bodybuilding went. And I see this trend happening in the biohacking community. And the conversations that come out is, I'm going to live to be 300 years old, or I'm going to live to be 150, or I think it's, and you get these wild proclamations that are very outside of any sort of statistical probability. I mean, like not 1 sigma, like 6 or 7. It's almost mathematically impossible, but they're advocating and selling this story. Do you think, based on your analysis and your understanding of things today, that life extension into where do you think the limits are? Where do you think the or let's start there. Let's just go there first.
You asked great questions. I'm really enjoying this, and I hope you don't mind.
Yeah.
If I have a little fun, because we get along behind the scenes real well.
Yeah.
And but in answer to your question, 20 years ago, I read a book called The 120-Year Diet by Roy Wolford. He was he was the nutritionist for both biosphere experiments, where they put people in this big sphere and they had them live in there, grow their own food and do all this stuff. So he was the nutritionist, the one to make sure they got all their macronutrients, all their micronutrients, all the phytonutrients, all the essential fatty acids and trace elements and things like that. And he was a professor at, they'll kill me if I say the wrong one, UCLA or USC, arch rivals and enemies, of course, but one of those. And he did experiments with rats. Now, rats don't live more than 24 months, period. You go get a new rat, 2 years, they're going to die within a month of that if you treat them right, if you treat them really good. So he had rats living 60 months. So if there's someone who knows something about anti-aging and longevity, I give the guy a lot of credibility. And he said 120 years, that's what you can get out of a human body because of programmed cell death and telomeres and things like that. So I'd buy that. Most people, when I say it, they say, who wants to be 110?
Right.
Like they just don't, no one really seems, maybe in the biohacker community, you're right, most people just want to die gracefully. My mom is 91. The other day she said to me, hey, I might be getting some shoulder surgery. I go, Mom, don't get shoulder surgery. What do you want that for? She goes, well, when I'm doing my backstroke in the pool, like it's hurting, my right hurting. 91. So all we hope is that we go in our sleep, not in the hospital, and the body's going to expire. Now, I believe in what I've studied is that it's not predetermined, but your genetics have something to do with it. I've got a great aunt that lived to be 100, lived in 3 centuries, born in the 18th or 19th, lived the entire 20th century, didn't die till the 21st century. And then my mom is same side of the family I take after. So I think if I take really good care of myself, I can live with my wife, who's 25 years younger, for a good little run here, And but it's really hard to predict. So it's that genetics and then the epigenetics, the DRESS program that I told you. If you do FDN, you're going to run some labs and you're going to see where you're at in all these areas. And then you're going to do a DRESS program, customized, DRESS. But it's right for your genetics. The diet, rest is really incredibly important. And I don't mean just sleep. I mean resting your emotions and your spirit, and lots of ways of rest besides sleep, which is, there's a way to make sure you're sleeping right. The exercise, the stress reduction is, again, the most variable area, and then supplementation. They need to be customized too. And so that's how you live long as you're going to live, and don't get hit by a bus.
Right.
And then there's the other things that are unforeseeable that could be brought down on us. And I think it's really important we be very conscious, self-aware, and conscientious, and work towards everyone doing it kind of together. Like, we don't all have to be the same or think the same way or dress the same way or anything like that. I'm all for individual liberty. And I'm very much against anyone trying to take mine from me.
I would agree with on all those points. And I think it's funny, we've come to similar conclusions. I can remember being asked on a famous podcast with a couple of biohackers who were suggesting extraordinary lifelongs. And I remember just throwing out a number and I remember thinking that doesn't feel authentic to me, and like to myself, I felt myself get caught up in the moment, and I was like, oh, I got to retract that. I think that's a good model. I think if we've got, let's say, I lived on a street that had literally 4 centurions, one who's still alive today. She's in my little town in Hillsborough. I don't know, it must have been something in the water or who knows, but the bottom line, that's pretty unusual that in a small street, there's 4 centurions.
Jeez.
And pretty extraordinary. And I was always fascinated. There was a fellow in my church. He was 106 years old when I was a little boy.
God.
His name was Harvey Rogers, and I just wanted to sit next to him because I couldn't believe anybody. If I was like, 6, 7.
Maybe it'll rub off on you,
Yeah, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And my next door neighbor, she lived to be 103, and then the other next door neighbor lived to be 101. And there's another lady that was 4 doors down, and my mom sees her to this day, and she's the ripe old age of 102. Pretty impressive. And all of them lived at home to a century level. They didn't go into these other issues. So I'd say that 120, let's say that's the potential. Let's just use that as a benchmark. There has been reports of people making it to 120. So that's like 100 out of 100 on the test, And all of us are probably some percentage based on lifestyle choices. In your opinion, what do you think are the choices that reduce your longevity potential or contribute to a very compromised life while you're here? What are the big factors that you see?
Oh man, you're talking to someone who has a very well used body, and has subjected it to some damage, poisons, and I'm not talking about just recreational drugs or anything like that. Back in the 70s, we all did some shits. I started in the 60s. But your chemicals and things, people that work in industry, for a while, I was a furniture refinisher.
Oh yeah.
And man, the amount of chemical, the brain damage, the liver damage. I've asked many physicians I respect, there's a way for me to test, and they're like, nope, you just got to take your lumps and keep on moving. Don't do that shit anymore. Like if you smoked, quit smoking, and stuff. I mean, some of it's just really obvious, but the rest, I hate to sound like a broken record, but you go back to taking care. What I noticed in the office, I worked there 10 years. I saw thousands of patients of the doctors there, but I was the guy behind the scenes, the nutritionist, personal trainer, lab guy. And that's what I became known for, was the nutritionist who ran labs. And the reason I started teaching is I knew I could help more people by deputizing others. But the pressure I was getting from some of these lab people, they were asking me, who the hell are you? You run more labs than so-and-so's office, famous doctor, and he has 5 doctors working there. How are you doing this? And you got to go out and teach others. So I was doing an incredibly high volume, more than you could imagine. By the way, all of it with just a pager and a fax machine. And so I noticed some patterns, and the patterns I recognized, I've already given them to you. I started just testing women's hormones. I actually had a bone density testing machine. I'd go out to these locations. I had a whole route. So when the office was closed, I'd go out and do my route, make a bunch of cash doing bone density testing. I started giving them all a hormone test kit. I had a website called Bones and Hormones. when we finally got into websites. And so I noticed the hormones were really important. Besides nutrition, everyone knows that, and the rest and the exercise and stuff, hormones. But it didn't help everybody. So I started looking into digestion, and then it was helping more people. Oh yeah, that really. And then the detoxification system and the immune system, and that HIDD, hormone immune digestion, that served me for years. Really getting great results, great reputation, built my business up. They told me I was the busiest nutritionist in this country, but I still hadn't figured it all out. I wasn't not satisfied. I didn't like anyone going to see someone else. And so I didn't want to lose client. I hate marketing. Well, I love lecturing. I didn't consider it marketing. So I depended on referrals and lecturing. And when I discovered metabolic typing and figuring out the oxidative rate and the autonomic type of a person, that sealed the deal. So that's energy production and nerve. That's the EN. So HIDDEN, and that's how we look. Those are the most recognizable patterns. You can test them all easily and cheaply and inexpensive. Like self-testing kind of a thing, and then. You can't treat any one thing. You have to have a program that has an effect on every cell, tissue, organ, and system in the person, a holistic program, including their mind. A lot of people's problems are within the complexities of their mind and emotions. I believe in spiritual angst or spiritual joy, and these things. So I don't have a magic formula, unless you want to call that a magic formula.
Well, I know some people believe it's magic because it works like magic if you apply it. So it seems.
Then there's the Jack Lalanne method. Have you heard of that?
No, tell me.
Well, you know who Jack Lalanne was.
Of course, and one of the great legends in our industry.
Great legends, and he never did roids, to my knowledge. He just
had a crazy physique.
A lot of push-ups, and swimming. And matter of fact, he was being interviewed. He was about 93, and what's the secret to your success, Jack? And he says, well, I go to the gym every day, I swim every day, and I have sex almost every day. And they laugh and like, okay, Jack, you're 93, But they went to Mrs. Lalanne. They asked her, Mrs. Lalanne, Jack says that the secret to success is going to the gym every day, swimming every day, and having sex almost every day. And she goes, it's true. Almost on Monday, almost on Tuesday, almost on Wednesday.
That's great. Jack certainly was an inspiration. I think that's inspired a lot of
I
people.
can't help myself, man. You know, if I have an audience, I'm going to have to say something dumb or something funny.
Would you say then, based on this, your experience with all these labs, that toxicity is impacting people's health more than anything? Would you think that's one of the big metabolic drivers, that they can't rid themselves of a chemical, or there's some sort of chemical agent that's disrupting their health?
Yeah. On a serious note, and I do get serious about it. You know, I said that one of the major functions in your body would be detoxification. So you have the liver, you have the kidneys, you have the lymph, you have the colon, you have the skin, and these are your detoxifying organs. We measure the liver because it's considered the granddaddy, and it's reflective of everything else going on in the body, and it's simple and cheap and easy, a direct measurement of liver function. And so we can tell if it's congested. Now, that is not a diagnosis. That's not like, let's say you get a couple blood markers that are high and they go, oh, it's your liver. We're going to watch that real closely for 6 months. If you came back and those markers are still high, the AST, ALT, they would say, well, let's test you. You know, they look for cirrhosis or hepatitis or some actual pathology of the liver. We don't. That's what they do. We look for how well is it functioning, how well is it filtering your blood, purifying your blood. And we know about the phases of detox and things like that, and all the nutritional requirements, things that have to be going on. But we can actually measure, do you have a congested liver? Well, that explains a whole lot of problems. And it's not a medical diagnosis, but it explains partly why you're in bad shape. You know, people show up with a lot of sometimes vague complaints. Doctors call it general malaise, or, you know, like fatigue, you know. But to diagnose you, they would have to run some tests and get a couple of findings that say that you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, you know, fibromyalgia if it gets worse, and on and on and on. So again, we don't fractionate. We absolutely avoid fractionating and never think it's that one thing, like, oh, it's detoxification. That word means so many things anyway. I'm detoxing, man. You know, like after every weekend.
Yes, no doubt.
You know, or, you know, I'm detoxing, meaning you're going into rehab for a couple months.
Exactly.
You know, or so there's all these different ways to use the word detoxification, but we look at it real physiologically, get the measurements, and you can extrapolate from there. But you can get people to do things. Number one, I think Paul Chek says this: you can't empty a bathtub when the water's still running. You know, so if you're still doing the thing that got you there in the first place, you got to change your habits, and that can be a tough thing. But we certainly can improve these things. You know, they may never be perfect. And so what I like to say is, look, people are on a stairway to health. Some have a lot of friggin' steps to go. You know, you meet some people, oh my God, you wonder where in the hell they're going to start. Well, we actually have a place to start with the labs and then with the protocol. And everyone's got their own way of handling those steps. And we help them up the steps. Maybe one day they'll pass us and go on and be higher, but I don't know anyone at the top. I don't know one person who's at the top of the steps. So we've all got our crosses to bear, and we just need to do it together. You know, I'm all into, you know, I'm a 60s child, you know, peace and love, make love, not war, and all that stuff, you know, and doing things as a community and together. And that's why we have a community of FDN practitioners, you know, and we're all on a mission.
Well, for those who haven't heard of you on our podcast, I think it would be worth checking out your institution, what you're doing. For practitioners, I think that you offer one of the finest institutions and education programs that are out there. Can you talk a little bit about FDN and what the whole idea and behind it, and where people can find out more if they'd said, hey, you know what? I want to learn these things. I want to be like Reed. I want to be able to zoom out and see the big picture. I want to be able to run labs and understand what they mean and look at these pictures. I think it's there's a lot of practitioners who want to take their education in the next level. They want to go to and have those tools in the toolbox. Can you talk a little bit about your institution?
I could talk a lot about it, but the it's really just a course, but it's a robust course. It's not something you can do in a weekend or even 5 weekends. You know, you got to put some time into it. If you work a job full time, you could probably do it in 10 months, and legitimately. And but people have done it a lot quicker. It's self-paced, but you got to learn basically what I learned in 10 years in 10 months. So I put it all together. I think I'm a pretty good teacher. I've been working on it since 2008 when I taught my first class. Again, I've been doing it in the clinic. Everything I learned, all the lab testing, all the protocols, everything put together, I put together for one reason: to help our clients, our patients that were coming in the office, not to start a school or a system. You know, I just did it for us, but I was encouraged, so almost made to teach. And then I finally realized if I did, it would help a lot more people in the world. And so I taught this first class in 2008, and I interviewed the first 2,000 graduates, a half hour of my time and theirs. What could I do to make the course better? What brought you to the course? Almost everybody they were on the stairs and knew it. And they were able to really accelerate their pathway up the stairs by doing FDN on themselves, which is a requirement of the course. You're going to run labs on yourself, and I pay for them. They're part of your tuition, and you're going to get all the counseling. I have 30 people work for me, and all these different continents, so you could do this almost anywhere. And but once you graduate, after all the lab training, all of the protocol training, even some business training, because you could do this as an independent health entrepreneur. Then you go out in the world and you do some good. You just duplicate what you learn. Don't change anything. Not at first. Just go do it the way that you learned, and you'll help people. Follow the principles. So again, you said the body heals itself. Well, we coach that up. We coach up the healing. You coach it up with diet and with rest and exercise. You're coaching up function of all these systems in the body, every cell, tissue, organ, and system. Well, you also coach down the contributors to metabolic chaos. If you got parasites, bacteria, funguses, viruses, if you have food sensitivities and other things in your environment, we want to, squash that. We want to coach that down when we coach up function. It's as simple as that. And I make it real simple. I kind of make it fun. My teaching styles maybe not for everybody, but we take on all the nerds, all the geeks, and all the fun people too, and put them all together. We have a great time. When you graduate, you'll have full access to our medical director program. Now, I wouldn't want anyone to sign up just to get my hands on some labs. I want you to learn the right way to look at these and the entire philosophy and methodology. Methodology is a method with a way of thinking attached to it. It's not just a method, it's a methodology. So you got to get the ology, and then we'll support you. We have a membership, and again, this was just what I interviewed the first 2,000 people, and a lot of times we got, what do you do for the postgrads? Well, that's where the Association of FDN Professionals came from. So I have a person who runs that, Jennifer. She's the executive director of that. And there's all kinds of ongoing education and support and business training and peer groups and monitored Facebook. And I do a show every single Friday for the last 14 years. Wow. For the grads. I do a show every Friday for all the trainees too. So the trainees are in one group and then the grads are in another, because that's just how it works. And so it's an amazing opportunity if you are a personal trainer I'll just say this, that most of our graduates do have a college degree, or at least some college, a certificate or two in something, and some work experience. And they might be a little bit frustrated. People are dropping out of their program and not all getting the results, or they've got some problems that you wish you could help them with, like the hormones or immune and these kind of things. It really is the holy grail for a practitioner, a solo or group, even a group health entrepreneur, is a waiting list referral based practice. Waiting list referral based. You aren't spending anything on advertising. Your best advertisement is a healthy person that you helped. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. And people can go to functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com/bioptimizers, like bio and optimizers condensed into bioptimizers. That's you.
That's right. That's us. And we're happy to support your work. And for anyone who wants to check that out, it is in the show notes, www.functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com/bioptimizers. Click on there. You'll get your free Dress for Health Success guidebook and can check in with Reed and his entire institution. I highly recommend. I've checked out your institution, and what's fascinating is across the field of the people that I run into, and we run in a lot of the same circles, over and over and again, your name comes up and your institution. So thank you for the service that you are doing in the world. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been super fun following up on this. And for our listeners, I would encourage all of you to take the next step. It's inevitable that you are going to interact with someone who has some sort of condition or some sort of situation that our institutions, frankly, are not going to manage properly. And I believe that this might be a pathway that can allow you to understand what's going on in your own body, or the people that you care for, or the people that you're in charge of caring for, can provide them some insight, some direction, and some opportunities for healing. Reed, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Any closing words for our team?
I'm just really glad that I ran into you, Wade. I know you're doing amazing work, and I hope to keep seeing you around at some of these conferences and things, and we can chew the fat and do some good in the world. Thank you.
You got it. Thanks so much. And for all of us joining us today, that's another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Dhg Ratio from Bioptimizers. Check out the links. Take time, do your education, and thanks so much for joining. Take care and have a great day.
And now for a Bioptimizer's fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.